You're listening to CreepGeeks Podcast. So it begins again. Welcome to CreepGeeks Podcast. This is Season 6, Episode 249.
Listener question, paranormal experience symptoms, and crazy pills.
Yeah. So we're glad you're with us. I'm Greg.
I'm Omi.
And we're going to talk about some stuff that we find to be interesting because our podcast is what?
CreepGeeks Podcast is an offbeat podcast broadcasting paranormal news and strange experiences from our underground bunker in the mountains of western North Carolina.
That's right. Very, very nice. Okay, so if you'd like to contact us, we have a couple different ways you can do that. One of those ways is basically free to you. It's called a toll-free number.
Yes, it's a voicemail inbox, so give us a call, leave a message. That phone number, 575-208-4025.
Yeah.
Now, you can also reach out to us on our website, creepgeeks.com. Go there, click on the Contact Us button on the left-hand side, and reach out.
Absolutely. We'd like to hear from you. Okay, so everything we talk about on the podcast, there are links provided for you to go back and take a look and click and do whatever you want to do with. And it's also there as a way for, hey, if we find places and use content because they have done something amazing, we like to give back to them by providing a full link so that you can click and go do whatever you got to do.
Yeah.
Because that's the right thing to do, As much as we all steal memes and links and everything else, you should always put some kind of annotation.
Yeah, whether it's
something to go back to the source.
Annotating to go back to the source or
right.
Providing recognition for some research or additional info.
Yes, yeah. And that's what we do. So anyway, that being said, before we start the podcast and move into it, because we do have lots of great things to talk about, we would like to tell you what we're going to have for dinner after we get done with this podcast. Somebody has asked us a long time ago, don't remember who it was exactly, but it's a tradition we've carried on for, a whole season or whatever. What are we going to have after we get done recording this podcast, which is also one of the things that's very important to me.
It was actually one of our moderators for the Creep Geeks Facebook group. And
who was it?
Spoons.
Spoons. What's up, Spoons?
So, yeah.
We need to check in on old Spoons and see what's going on.
Creep Geeks after the podcast dinner today is going to be real easy. It's going to be a Stranger Things pizza and corn dogs.
Oh, yeah, from Surfer Boy Pizza and corn dogs.
Yes.
There's nothing celebrates America like corn dogs.
Well, these ones are jalapeno and honey crust, which sounds fancy, but it's still a corn dog.
Yes.
So
yeah, I forgot. We had those the other day or a week ago or whatever it was when we got them. It was like, I forgot that they were spicy. And I thought there was something terribly wrong with my corn dog. But I powered through it.
I made sure I got
because a lot of people are like, ooh, something's weird, I'm going to stop. No way, man. I'm in it.
I made sure I got those because I thought they were special when we lived in New Mexico.
Nope.
And I'd go to that one gas station. And then one day they left,
okay.
left the box out.
Let's do a disclaimer or maybe explain a little bit because you're talking about, I thought they were special because they were gas station corn dogs. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are like, what? Nothing good comes from gas station cuisine. But there are certain gas stations in certain places that actually have really good food. And one of them was like, you catch a random burrito that's amazing from a place that's right across from a casino.
Yeah.
And 7 miles away from the res. And it's like, man, it was good.
Or All Sups, which is really big in the West. That particular gas station is actually well known for its chimichangas and burritos. And
and they're not super healthy by any means, but they're just that good gas station cuisine. We're not talking about gas station sushi, which is just
it's just literally
gross.
A Futurama episode, but yeah.
So,
so I had gotten these jalapeno and honey crusted corn dogs from this one particular gas station, and I'd get them literally once a month. And I thought they were special until one day they left the box out, and I was just so heartbroken.
Oh, yes.
But that's what we'll be having for dinner. Yeah.
Yes. Very nice. Okay, so when we get questions from listeners, we listen to them and we read them and we think, do we put this in the podcast or not?
Okay.
And the short answer is usually yes. We'll just throw it in there because whatever, right? Sometimes you just get some weird stuff that's just completely rambling and you're like, this is obviously not a question. And it
Or you
doesn't
get
apply.
really open-ended questions, which I'll tell you about later, that should be like their whole episode unto
And
themselves.
like, I don't want to. This is going to be 2 hours. But in this particular case, we have a wonderful question from Wraith.
Yep.
And this is from our YouTube channel, which we have a link to, of course, and you can go to, basically, you can listen to the podcast there because we make it listenable for you. You can just kind of let it play. And the question, and there is a link, by the way, because like I said, we do have links. And the question is, if you want to read this question.
I sure do enjoy the podcast. Thanks for all the time and work that goes into it. Have y'all ever had a spirit follow you home after ghost hunting?
So that's a great question.
Yeah.
And the short answer is, I don't know. Now, you're giving me that look. So you're like, meh, meh, meh. And let me tell you, all right. Sometimes I say things on the podcast, and then Omi refreshes my memory. And I typically look foolish when it happens, and that's okay. And I think that's probably what's going to happen, because you guys can't see the expression.
Okay.
Now, a little spoiler alert, maybe in the future you will be able to see the expression. We're still sort of testing Starlink. The satellite internet. It's supposed to be the savior of rural garbage internet. We'll see how that works. But anyway, it's something.
Getting back to the question.
Spoiler. Okay, so the question was,
have y'all ever had a spirit follow you home after ghost hunting?
Yeah.
Now, we learned early on through a lot of our ghost hunting friends, one of the best ways to protect yourself from having a spirit or negative energy follow you home or drift into your life after a paranormal investigation is to ward yourself before the investigation, anywhere from an hour before to days before, basically working yourself up to be protected from the investigation itself, or to sage, smudge, or cleanse yourself after the investigation. And we always
also, you got to add, set the intention.
Yeah. Well,
You
that's
have to
part of that building up for days beforehand.
No, I mean set the intention as in, I'm leaving. Thank you very much. You are not coming with me.
That's part of the whole
At the end of
cleansing
the
yourself.
investigation.
Yeah. Now, when we've investigated, typically we have this. We have one friend, and she will smudge us after certain investigations when we're with her. We always set that intention. Okay, I am walking away. This is the end of my interaction with you, kind of like closing a Ouija board session. However, there have been some instances where we have warded ourselves or we have cleansed ourselves afterward, where we may have missed a step in our normal practices and things have happened. Most notably, to one of our team members who investigated a popular bar in Asheville. He just kind of had some bad stuff happen when he left that investigation.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
And then we investigated a place out in far western North Carolina towards Mars Hill. And Greg and I, as well as another team member, I don't think we closed the whole door after that. We said, okay, I'm done with this. And I want to say the whole week afterward, you and I had a rough time after that one.
Yeah.
And it was like...
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, it was... I had migraines all week. One of the other members, she was in the emergency room off and on for stomach issues that week.
See, but no, full disclaimer, and we're not going to rehash that because we're talking about years ago.
Yeah.
That particular place, I don't know if it was that sort of maybe paranormal experience or environmental.
I think it was a negative energy.
Well, it's hard to say, and that's part of the reason why I'm like, not really, because here's the problem that you have when you have something that follows you home, right? Mm-hmm. How do you know? Because we've gone places, we do the warding and the smudging and all that stuff, and then for days afterwards, there's like stuff falling off shelves, weird noises, that kind of thing, and it sort of depends on where you go. I think we've had more instances of things following us home from going to a thrift store than any of the haunted places we've been.
That's very true.
Because when you have an experience and you've gone somewhere, because we've gone places and done our own little investigations and seen some things and come back, a lot of times we don't smudge ourselves because we're like, oh, there's nothing to this place. And then all of a sudden it's like, I'm sitting there whatever, looking at TikTok at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're standing in the kitchen snacking on something. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I wonder what she's got, because usually you find good snacks, and I'm like, let me go see what it's all about. And I look over, and I'm like, I wonder what she's got. And then turn around, and you come out of the bathroom. And that's happened a bunch, so it's kind of like, okay, it's kind of weird. Well, so I think with you anybody, you don't have to be a paranormal investigator. I think that if you're, maybe doing some thrifty stuff or repurposing things and going going to the thrift stores, that, it's entirely possible you might bring something back with you.
I was going to talk about specifically that Mars Hill thing, because we used cascara beforehand, which is supposed to be a protection powder. You had your bracelets on. I make protection bracelets. I had mine on. I had some jewelry on. We had some crystals in our pockets. And still, I can't say it was a spirit. There was some paranormal things that happened. And afterwards, somebody smudged us. Now, we left, and there were things like you were saying. You kept seeing a little black shadow about 4 feet tall.
Yeah, I don't know. See, I don't want to. I don't know. It was strange. Like I said,
but I always felt it was a negative energy.
Yeah.
So
it was strange.
Yeah.
So, and we have a couple people that, I don't know. It's weird, man, because when you talk about it afterwards, it's like nothing really sort of stood out. But I mean, I don't know. It's just an odd thing with that particular place. So it kind of is what it is with that. But there are different ways and different things you can do to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen. Like when ghosts follow you home, and we put a link in there. You can actually click on it and kind of read some things, and that link will take you to, or show you some other links where you can go and, hey, download a Kindle or an Amazon book from famous people that tell you how to keep from having this sort of thing happen to you, like Michelle Belanger. How do you say her last name? Belanger. Belanger. There we go. See, and she is a psychic medium, and she works with a lot of these famous shows on television, and she's written books about it, and there's links to that sort of thing as well. But one of the things that I think is pretty funny, and maybe not ha-ha funny, but sort of coincidental, right? And this is, I don't want to get too deep into this because you can talk surface level on this crap for a long time, but there are scientists and just general public that think that if you can't prove it with science, it's not a real thing. Just in general, whatever it is. And in this case, pertaining to ghosts, paranormal stuff, Bigfoot, whatever, right? If you can't do science out of it and prove that it exists, then it doesn't exist.
Okay.
Right? And we're talking about basically when ghosts following you home or spirit attachment or things like that. Right? And here recently on Skinwalker Ranch, that show, and some of the news has come out of there with Travis, actually working for NASA and DOD, and people were just shocked, even though that's what he said in the beginning, and he's been on Ancient Aliens and stuff, where they were talking about hitchhikers. And they'd have an experience, and then the experience sort of lingers with them. Like they would have an experience at the ranch, and then they would leave, right? Mm-hmm. And then have experiences at home or having things like that happen to them. And he basically said, this was an interview with George Knapp, from Mystery Wire, and also from the channel in Nevada, the television channel. I don't know which one it is, but kind of talking about that. And I'm sitting there, and I watched the interview, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, they're calling them hitchhikers, and I'm thinking spirit attachment and things like that. And it kind of goes into the whole amorphous idea that if you stare into the paranormal or the unknown, it'll stare back. And once you sort of get involved in that sort of thing, then you can kind of stay involved in it. And it seems like it ebb and flows between having lots of things happen to you or having lots of instances where you're like, what's going on? Or am I experiencing things to not? And they, and Travis made reference to the hitchhikers and having things happen at home and that sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you're science-minded and there's really no way to describe that, you're like, whatever, that's not a thing. But they have given it a name. Right?
Yeah.
It's called basically quantum entanglement. And this is what Travis was saying. He was like, there are scientists and researchers who are actually researching quantum entanglement, which is basically saying that if you're involved in something, you will always be involved in something. And no matter what you do, it spans time, space, dimensions, whatever. It's there.
Yeah.
And so if you've been sort of influenced by that or had an experience with that, it's entirely possible that that's just kind of the way it is, and you will have that experience because it's related. Everything is related. But they go into a way more scientific sort of explanation for all that stuff. But they call it quantum entanglement, and then Travis basically said quantum entanglement problem. I just thought it was funny that it's a thing now. Or it's becoming more of an accepted thing now with this whole quantum entanglement. So, which is, I kind of thought was like sort of a duh moment, because throughout time, anybody, let's just say throughout time, people in general have recognized that it's possible to have spirits attached to you, whether it be possession or just in general, or have instances happen because you've gone to a place and all of a sudden, by being in that place, there's some influence that happens, and you can have experiences later or whatever, right? Everything from like my car turning off to, I hear weird noises, something's in my bedroom, all that crazy stuff, right? And if all that is part of a quantum entanglement, is what they're calling it with a science explanation now, and we know that kind of thing has been around since the beginning of time, it's sort of duh. Because if you talk to anybody that's involved in paranormal or believes in this kind of thing and does ghost stuff or even UFOs or cryptid stuff, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And you say, hey, have you ever had something follow you home or had an experience or whatever after you've left whatever thing you were doing, whether it be an investigation or an area you're researching or whatever? They all say, yeah. And to look out for it. And the more you do, the more likely you are to experience something like that. Now, whether that's because you've got your eyes open to it now and you're looking for it, or it's just that the light's been shined on you because you're involved in it, who's to say? But now that science is trying to be serious about it in a way, now it's become more of a thing. And that's been the buzzword, like hitchhikers, all this crazy stuff. And we're like, duh.
Just trying to think of it from like
cursed objects and possession and spirit attachment, all that stuff.
Yeah, right? Like the whole, like the old-timey saying, like poison or evil to the bone.
Yeah.
Or nefarious to the core.
Or, evil will befall you, you and your curses and
like,
everything.
Like when it's like this one person and they're describing this person or this villain or this bad person in history as like evil to the soul, down to the core components, whether it's like skin cells or their heart. If they've entered into a place, and then from the science perspective, they've left skin cells, they've left their energy, they've left all that stuff, and now you're walking
particle involvement.
Yeah, now you're walking into there. So that entanglement right there is just being in the presence of or walking away from, like passive touch DNA, and now you've got it on you. So
it's like you've changed your molecular charge to a way that makes it more attractive to you, and the energy is neither created nor destroyed in the whole deal. And it's like, oh, I see what you're doing here. But it's just kind of one of those things. And I thought this question was fortuitous when it came up. And I'm like, wow, that's a... And then my next thought was, I wonder if he watched the Skinwalker Ranch, and that's, maybe he's seen an interview. Who knows, right? So it was just kind of a thing, but...
For everybody's convenience, I've turned the Fortean term of the day into quantum entanglement.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Well, I was trying to find specifically quantum entanglement problem.
Yeah.
But can't really find that. It was just sort of a thing, and we sort of stayed away from the whole Skinwalker Ranch and really got into that because I don't know. I don't want to get into it because like in 2 minutes we're going to be talking about it.
Yeah.
In sort of a vague way. So anyway, with the 14 term of the day being quantum entanglement and the idea of having attachments happen to you or hitchhikers or whatever you want to call it, sort of loosely based all around the same thing. Mm-hmm. It got me thinking, man, things are getting crazy when science is going, well, quantum entanglement. And right now there's somebody's grandma is like, you mean spirits? Right? And you're like, no, I'm talking about quantum entanglement or using the science you speak. No, you mean spirits. And it's like, yeah, okay, spirits, right? You know what I mean? It's like, if you go to a scary, evil place and you leave, that evil takes a while to get off of you kind of a thing, whether you're protecting yourself or not. So it's just sort of this amorphous kind of topic, right? And it got me looking in some deeper things to kind of put into the podcast and stuff. And what I noticed was like all the news articles that we talk about, because we are a paranormal weird news podcast and we do talk about strange experiences that we've had. It's crazy. And I picked some ones that I thought were kind of something we can talk about without going so incredibly deep into anything at all that it would spend up more. It would be less fun to explain things in great and agonizing detail. You know what I mean? And so with Crazy Pill, and I started looking at some of these, I was like, what is going on? And this is the first one that caught my eye. And this is from a link that basically we put in. It says paranormal experiences are normal.
Yeah.
And not the exception.
Well, yeah.
For a long time, it was like, but the thing about the entire article is, this is from Psychology Today, and honestly, I don't know.
The first sentence, though, explains it, though.
Go ahead and read the first sentence.
And this is where, so the title is Paranormal Experiences Are the Norm, Not the Exception. However, the first sentence indicates, a new study published in Spirituality in Clinical Practice explains that individual experiencing hauntings and ghostly experiences may have haunted people phenomena.
Yeah.
But I'd like to point out that this study is Spirituality in Clinical Practice.
Yeah.
Our definition as humans in the year 2022 of paranormal extends into what people in previous generations used to acknowledge as part of a religious or spiritual experience.
Yes, because see, you can separate religion and spirituality from these paranormal experiences and science,
and
which
you
is
can
what's
combine
happening.
them. But if you combine them, if you look at them and go, wow, that's an unexplained phenomenon. Unexplained phenomenon can get described as both spirituality or paranormal.
Yeah.
So these things so to acknowledge certain spiritual events or religious events right there, I mean, that counts as something normal.
It does now.
Yeah.
It's becoming more accepted. But what I found to be really interesting about most of this, and I kind of glossed through it, and like, I really don't want to go into this because, but there are some things, some symptoms, if you will, of people that may or may not be having a paranormal experience. Which, from reading it, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Because we've seen some of these, and I thought we'd put them in here. There's 4 of these. And these are just like symptoms you'd have for like the flu. And severity is a function of the degree and rarity of the symptoms and their length. In other words, it's the dose that makes the poison along with the exposure, right? So, and this is done with these 4 core features, and we do have a link in the show notes. The meaning is basically making or narrative created around a haunting experience or experiences is influenced by personal backgrounds, beliefs, and personality characteristics. Mm-hmm. And that's just a way of saying, whatever you think is going on, the thing that people bring to the table that is these contributing factors that make up a person, upbringing, religious things, whatever, right, is going to sort of define the experience. Like if you're a Vulcan from Star Trek and you have no emotions or none of that stuff, you're not going to have probably the same experience that someone who comes from a different background probably would. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So what you bring to the table as in your makeup of a human is just sort of going to determine what kind of paranormal experience you have, or if you even have one at all, or if you could even call it paranormal. That right there, that very first sort of core statement for this whole thing is the way you can easily dispute or basically refute anything that anybody says. Mm-hmm. You've seen a 4-foot-tall demon in the corner of your house wearing buckled shoes because that's your Irish ancestry and the fairy fae folk and the idea behind it. That's why you've seen that. You know what I mean? And that's what you associated that with. And the second one says, anxiety and distress regarding hauntings are a function of the nature, closeness, and spontaneity of anomalous experiences.
Okay.
So it adds to it, right?
Yeah. So if you're already, and that's been long noted in paranormal investigations, is asking people who are involved in a paranormal situation, what's your stress level? What's your mental health level? Are you has something recently happened in your house?
Yeah, nobody ever says that.
Yeah.
They always look at it. We're talking like, are you freaking out? And people will tell you.
Yeah, like, somebody will have some incredible, and the Conjuring movies are a good example of that. There's all this chaos and all this momentum that builds up right before the paranormal experience, and then you go and you look back right before the paranormal experience, those people were stressed out. There was anxiety. There was all sorts of stuff going on, Yeah. And now it follows with that third characteristic, which is distress and unease, make anomalous experiences more likely to occur. So if you're already distressed, stressed out, or uneasy, then your focus is I'm not going to say you're unfocused, but your focus is placed differently. Therefore, it is more likely for an anomalous experience, something outside of your current zone of understanding, to occur.
Sure.
Now, whether or not that is I saw a UFO or I saw a ghost, or you weren't paying attention and a tree branch falls out of a tree,
Right.
So.
And the fourth one says anomalous experiences tend to be contagious, spreading to others. And that makes sense. I'm going to use a weird example.
Mm-hmm.
Bees. You're walking through the woods.
Mm-hmm.
You see a bee. Not a big deal. See a couple bees. Not a big deal. You're calm and cool.
Yeah.
Right? Everything is great. You walk past that big beehive, no problem.
Okay.
Now you're walking through the woods. You've been stung by bees and you don't like them. They cause you great fear. Mm-hmm. You see one bee, you get a little worked up. See some more. Right? 5 or 6 bees, you're freaking out. Right? The person walking with you is like, what's going on? You're like, there's bees. So now that person's getting worked up. How many bees are there, right? And the more bees you see now, because you're fully aware of them, because you've been stung before and you're freaked out and you don't like bees, it just basically adds everything to the problem. You're stressed out. You're freaking out because you want to run. All that crap is contagious. And by you being all freaked out by these bees, you're also influencing the bees. The bees were just cruising around doing their own thing, and all of a sudden you're getting all worked up and screaming and yelling and flopping around.
Your pheromones change.
Your pheromones, your fear sweating. And the bees are like, get them. Let's attack them. Let's get them.
But it doesn't have to be as like significant as you've explained, because as podcasters, content creators, writers, whatever, it could be as simple as, like I go on a hike, I see 2 rattlesnakes. So as I'm walking further down the trail and somebody's going the other direction, opposite direction, I go, hey, be careful. I seen a rattlesnake about half a mile up. So now that entire half mile that person's walking, they're like, that's where it ensues, like your situation. I'm going to see a rattlesnake. Yep. And it's going to create that experience and create that unease.
Yep.
So now anybody who walks through that particular section of that hiking trail, oh my God, there's a rattlesnake.
Yes.
It's the same way with haunted houses. I saw a ghost. Somebody else saw a ghost.
And your symptoms for paranormal experiences, right?
Yeah.
Basically, it's who you are, your anxiety and distress regarding the situation that you're in, right? Because it's a natural thing, nothing you can do about it. So typically, if you're going to have an experience, you're probably way more anxious and distressed about the entire thing. And that distress and unease will make it more likely for something to occur, whether it's going to occur or not. In other words, everything was fine until you get all freaked out about being in a spooky situation and somebody, stepped on a tree branch or did something that boom, sends the whole thing off, right?
Yeah.
And so you're more likely to experience something since you're already on edge and everything else. And then those experiences tend to be contagious.
Yeah.
So those are the symptoms to look for paranormal experiences there.
Yeah. Oh, what is it? Haunted people phenomena.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or haunting phenomena.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But after we talked about it, I realized it wasn't as interesting as I thought it was.
But no, imagine using this as a guide or a way to explain mass hysteria or combined experiences.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can work any one of those factors, and you can it's kind of one of those things where you can sort of make that sort of thing happen, right? You can directly influence all that. But going back to the crazy pill news, right? This is something that we've talked about, and it seems like it's starting to occur and become more of a thing. And this has been with the UFOs and the UAPs, right? Mm-hmm. And everything that's been coming out with, disclosure is coming. And look at all this stuff, and the government doesn't know what they are. And all, it seems like now things are starting to get to the point where it's becoming more terrestrial versus extraterrestrial. There's been a couple of...
You mean the thing you've saying for past 2 years?
Yeah,
okay.
That it's more of a thing that's not extraterrestrial related, as in shock. Some of these drones that have been flying around buzzing ships, and these drone swarms are actually created by humans, governments, whatever.
And see, I remember, passionately disagreeing with you with that whole stuff that happened in southern Colorado, because I don't know, it just seemed a little too weird, especially like the physical symptoms that one or two of the experiencers had. But then you look back at it and it's like, oh, look at all this back recorded footage on YouTube from all these different people, you know? So now I'm like, well, maybe it was all terrestrial.
It is. And let me tell you why I think it is real quick. Some of the stuff the anomalous, weird stuff that can't necessarily be readily explained, like feeling nauseous and weird side effects and stuff. What would cause that sort of thing? If you look at the phenomenon from technology that you know of and that you're aware of on the everyday usage, right? We have drones. They fly with a lithium-ion battery pack. Mm-hmm. Or lithium battery, or whatever kind of battery. It's obvious, right? It's a battery, and you plug it up, you charge it. It flies for duration, does whatever it does. And then you look at the other type of fuel for propulsion for these things: gas, kerosene, even, your standard stuff.
You look at communication, RF frequencies,
right?
And stuff like
well,
that.
I mean, just look at just stick with propulsion, standard stuff. Now imagine that you have a government who wants to be on the cutting edge, bleeding edge of technology because it has to be, because other countries are doing that, and they are. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're not using the standard type of propulsion. Maybe they're using a different type of propulsion, right? One that's not common, one that's not known because it's still considered secret. And maybe you have something like the U.S. Navy scientists patenting all these alternative forms of propulsion. And maybe some of the side effects is nausea, headaches, chemical burns, or even radiological burns because they're using a different type of propulsion. That's just not known. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got where there's a company that's using ions to basically fuel or to use that as propulsion. They're using ions. Doesn't make a sound.
Yeah.
Can carry up to like certain. So it's like, that's crazy. And you see it, and it's just like, it looks like a freaking pizza box with 4 legs sticking out, just flying around.
Yeah.
Doesn't make, it's like, what is that? So it's entirely possible that, the hidden technology that's out there because of whatever, government development or whatever, is starting to become more and more seen and more known.
Okay.
Like China was allegedly admitted that, I think it was the Omaha, right? Oh, all those drones things that were buzzing around your ship, that was us.
Yeah.
And people are like, whoa, that's so far advanced. And it's not. We've talked about this before, where there's companies where you can say, hey, you know what? I don't want the scary fireworks that scare dogs and give people post-traumatic stress syndromes and all sorts of crazy stuff because they don't like the explosions. Can you bring over 500 drones, synchronize them, and fly them around and do, all sorts of crazy stuff just from the comfort of your laptop?
Yeah.
And they make signs and shapes in the air, and they do certain things, and they can, and that's somebody you can rent. You get a company. So I think a lot of the stuff, I still think it's like upwards of 80, maybe 85% of the things that people are seeing in the sky are not extraterrestrial, but terrestrial. Now, there are things that will never be explained properly. And I'm sure there's somebody, if they're listening, is like, well, I don't understand because, the gravity forces makes a type of flight impossible. Well, if you're looking at like some of the footage with some of these UAPs and stuff like that, they always look kind of fuzzy. What if they're generating a propulsive field that basically takes the gravitational field and disrupts it so that they can fly 1 million miles an hour and do all this crazy stuff? And the fuzziness is not because the cameras are garbage. The fuzziness is caused by that field around the craft that lets it move. It's like think about it being almost like a force field, but that's what actually causes propulsion. So I'm like, well, that's pretty crazy. But the reason why I put this in here is because now people that were originally starting to say, hey, this is extraterrestrial, are now leaning more towards maybe it's not extraterrestrial. Maybe it's more terrestrial in nature.
Okay.
I'm looking at you, Jeremy Corbyn. So, and I think a lot of the stuff that came out with UAP and the disclosure and, Black Vault and all this crazy stuff and Corbell was to make it, to pump the hype out, to get it super hyped up. Yeah. And now it's perfect for militaries because now, if it's mainly military, and they're right by saying, hey, we don't know who it is, we don't know what it is. Is it a diversionary tactic because they really know?
Yeah.
Or they really don't? I'd rather them just be lying to me that they really know what's going on, than just not. I'd like them to, and there's secrets that you got to be kept. You shouldn't be giving away stuff. So I thought that was pretty crazy. It went from ETs to might be military. It's like, okay.
Yeah. And
speaking of military and just basically technology in general, somebody shot the moon with a rocket and nobody's claiming it. It's like, well, yeah. And I looked at it and I'm like, I don't even want to talk about it. That's kind of boring. And I kind of thought about it because I've been watching that series on Apple TV where they go to the moon and do all this stuff. I can't think of what it's called. And of course, it went right out of my head. And I'm like,
is it like Don't Look Up or something?
No, that was a terrible. It was a good movie, but it was awful. It was like For All Mankind, I think is what it's called.
Oh yeah.
Where they talk about sort of a weird parallel sort of history with space, and I could just imagine. But I think what I thought was so interesting about it was somebody seen it.
Yeah.
Just like some regular dude seen this rocket body going to the moon, like with this big old telescope. It's like, what is that? Well, come to find out, nobody knows exactly who it is as far as who it is. Like, whose rocket is that? Nobody knows because nobody's claiming it.
That's like...
Just shoot some random rocket body at the moon?
You know how,
what?
Like, people are always like, be careful what you put on social media because somebody's always watching.
Yeah.
And it's like, be careful what you put on the moon because somebody's always watching.
It's like, hey, is that supposed to do that? Or maybe somebody made a mistake and that's why it's kind of showing up, right? It's like, what went terribly wrong to make this rocket do what it did? And it left like 2 crater impacts on the moon. So one was probably where the rocket body itself smacked the moon, and the other one next to it was probably whatever it was carrying. So maybe why did this go to the moon? And here's something: what if that thing was like full of some kind of sort of crazy advanced weaponry, and they had to save the planet, right? One of those like end of the world scenario things, and what if they blew up and nuked the moon?
I know. I could have sworn there's like a book or a TV series that talks about that, where somebody accidentally.
Well, no, in the 60s, they wrote up some papers that I don't remember exactly what government organization it was, trying to figure out what would happen if they nuked the moon.
Oh.
And they were like, well, we don't know exactly what's going to happen if we hit the moon with nuclear weapons, so let's just go ahead and try it. And they were going to nuke the moon to see what it would do. This was like in 63, I think. It's something crazy. We talked about it on podcasts like a couple different times. Like, oh, hey, what are you doing? Oh, let's just go ahead and nuke the moon. Well, what do you think's going to happen? So I thought that was kind of crazy. It's like, who shoots a rocket at the moon? Like, well, I have questions now.
Yeah.
Did it lose control? And was like the last place it was going was headed towards the moon and didn't make the orbit or whatever to get it in the geosynchronous orbit above the planet?
Yeah.
Was it like a rocket full of Starlink satellites to give me faster speed that had malfunction and are just bounced off the moon and they should be in that low orbit so I can get faster speed?
Yeah.
Who is it? Who made it?
The fact that
Did the North Koreans just like randomly shoot this thing off there and go, oh, that wasn't the right way?
The fact that nobody's willing to fess up about it just makes it just...
It's probably something simple like embarrassment. Yeah, it went wrong and we totally lost control over it and there's nothing we could do about it.
But there's like probably a scientific research group or panel or organization or even a government who's like, where's our rocket? We just did inventory.
I would hope that the government with the Space Force and everything else and like Air Force.
3 nerds going,
that know about it. I mean, you have to be able to see that, right? I mean, you're going to be looking at that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm hoping somebody is sitting there going,
Kevin did that.
Flight control, I think I see a rocket flying towards the moon. And they're like, all right, that's cool. So I thought that was kind of nutty. Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So somebody, why is it when I start talking, I feel like it's just terrible weather just attacking me in my throat. Speaking of CERN's back on again.
Great transition.
Well, I mean, think about it. Hey, allegedly things started going super crazy, right? When the Hadron Collider was all fired up and, they're like, hey, check it out. It's going to be great. We're going to make these mini black holes or whatever it is that we're going to do. Because it seems like the story changes. It changes based off my interest, right? And all of a sudden, they shut it down for a while. Now it's going to be back on again. You can even watch the run number 3 live on CERN's internal screens or on social media, and they're going to go for the most energy created or faster energy creation ever. I'm like, is that a good idea? If everybody is saying, okay, the Mandela effect is caused by like the Hadron Collider and CERN in general, and it's just basically doing, even the crazy theory that
everybody allegedly says that.
Well,
so,
whatever, you know what I mean. The crazy pill, right? So, what if, because they were saying, remember, that somehow or another, we've had this great reset because when we fired up the Hadron Collider in CERN, it nuked our existence, right, in a way that it basically took one of our parallel universes or dimensions and destroyed it. And they had to basically move our existence into that spot.
Yeah.
And things are a little off because of that.
Yeah.
Like we accidentally destroyed ourselves completely, and we had to shift us over.
A group of friends and I were talking about that because, like, one of the friends, their dad was like, yeah, I knew all about it. And another group, they weren't very familiar. They just remembered some like highlights from like TikTok or YouTube, like
the stuff that I like to look at. Like, oh, that's nice.
How it happened right in 2014, or it happened right before the election, And while there's so much science that the average person may not fully understand what's going on, you have to at least embrace or accept the fact that creating the most energy we've ever tried to sounds like a very, very big thing.
Yeah.
I mean, or significant and world changing, maybe reality changing.
Yeah. Maybe it's, but, and then, I had this thought. I was like, well, what if they fire this thing up, right? And they're telling us what they're trying to experiment for particle physics and things like that to, what if we're just trying to reset it back the way it was? Like, what if they fired it up and they screwed everything up, and we just been spiraling on this whatever for the past 4 years because things are terrible, and they're like, we got to fix this, man.
That's the meme my friend sent me. It was like, reptilians apologize at Parliament. We'll reset simulation back to 2015.
Well, hey, I mean, think about it. It's almost like, because we've been watching things like Stranger Things and the Umbrella Academy and all that stuff, and it's like, what if it just needs to we got to get back on track? Things are out of whack.
The thing is, though, both of those shows explored how one of the key components was a person or persons, and I'm like,
well, yeah.
So what if there's this one person or persons who are...
What if they just can't be truthful about it because they secretly know something?
That's true.
They say, well, we can't really use the organization because people would know. So let's just make the embodiment of the organization that caused this into a person. Yeah. Okay. So maybe CERN is the embodiment of a company or something like that. Or maybe, whatever, the story of the person. So I thought that was pretty nutty. I'm like, let's just fire it up and see what happens. And then I read somewhere, and I could not find the article where they were talking about, they were trying to merge parallel universes together. Let's see how close they could bring them together using a Hadron Collider. Because you told me about this. You're like, are they really doing this bullshit? And I was like, I don't even want to know, man.
And I think part of that was because, like, I had just got done reading.
Well, I saved it under episode
like
250 for our episode after this one, and 250 is gone.
Yeah.
So then my thought was, what if we're not supposed to know? And they're just removing all, like Berenstain and Berenstein Bear kind of a thing.
Oh, I saw a new one. Our friend Trevor shared it. And it was about children's cartoons in the 80s.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's like a group of people who don't think some of my favorite cartoons ever existed.
And those people,
like
reptilians.
Fern Gully or The Black Cauldron.
I
remember
my kids had both of those.
Yeah, I remember sitting in the theater for Fern Gully.
Yeah.
Because it was like one of the first times I ever got to do like 3D or IMAX. It was like 3D. And my astigmatism's so messed up and my nearsightedness is so messed up, I could only do... I couldn't really handle it. Oh. So with the cheapo glasses at the 3D theater.
Using your X-ray film glasses.
Yeah. So
CERN's back on. And then we were talking about UFOs. And here recently we watched The Kids in the Hall on Amazon Prime because they came back and they're older. And then I came across this. right?
Yeah.
And this little segment here that we're going to talk about is called Kids in the Hall UFO Experience. And it talks pretty much about a Twitter post that actor Dave Foley made. And he's in Kids in the Hall, where he basically said he had a UFO experience. And there's a rendering of the picture of what he actually seen. And I think you can go to singular14.com. There's a bigger picture of it to actually see it, where he drew it. And I'm looking at it, right? And it looks like it's hard to describe. You have to kind of see it, but it's sort of a rounded sort of triangle, almost like an arrowhead shape. It has 3 circles in the back that are lit up.
Really?
And yeah, and to me, it looks like a freaking spacecraft.
To me,
it looks like the X-37B. It's all rounded.
It looks like a tamale with 3 flashlights.
If you look at it coming at you, but that's going away, I would assume the point. So it's kind of like, wow, that's kind of crazy. And the Twitter post said, after years of interest in UFOs without ever seeing anything, I saw something. This is a drawing of what I saw. I was with a friend who I'll let decide if he wants to be attached to this. It moved silently at great speed, hovered, and pulsated with light. You know what I'm thinking?
What?
It's basically military technology.
Okay.
You know, because I was reading things about the TR-37B and the SR-52 and all sorts of crazy stuff, you know.
But I do think it's nice to see another person in media talking about stuff like this.
Well, it's Dave Foley's from Kids in the Hall.
I know.
Which is cool.
Hey, one of the best paranormal people that I greatly respect is Dan Aykroyd,
Yeah,
you know?
you should, because there wouldn't be a Ghostbusters without him and his knowledge, I think.
And he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
Dave Foley is hilarious. So
he basically said the craft appeared to be solid, about the size of a Greyhound bus or an 18-wheel truck. No rotors, no engine noise.
Huh.
He said, I should point out the white lights were on the front of the craft. So I was wrong. I've been looking at it the wrong way. Assuming that it was moving forward and the lights pulsated separately from the body of the craft, which also pulsated. Now, here's where I'm getting have a little weirdness about it. Mm-hmm. The friend in question appears to be documentary filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, who has garnered attention over the past years with his work as a public figure in the field of ufology.
Okay.
And I don't know. In some ways, and I'm going to say this because I'll probably never meet Jeremy Corbell. In some ways, I feel like he's kind of muscled his way in on some things. Mm-hmm. And because he's muscled his way in on some things, he's now been looked at or starting to be looked at as some kind of like expert on it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that should be the case. But
and
let me give you an example, because when you look at the Warrens, right, with Lorraine Warren, and you got the son-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sort of get that sort of vibe from Corbell. I may be completely wrong.
Now, granted, I will say there are people who have had to muscle their way into certain communities just to share or bring insight to those communities. However, I feel those people, like if I were to name some of them, they have substance and they have certain levels of contribution.
Yes.
I respect, you know.
When you watch a movie made by this person who is a filmmaker, in the first 3.5 minutes is about themselves. I kind of have a problem with that.
Yes.
And because the story wasn't about him. You know what I mean?
I will say that there seems to be a shift, and it goes back and it keeps flip-flopping depending on the mood and attitudes of the paranormal and UFO community, where media or films or articles or something like that, the community as a whole is very finicky and will either expect the film or a body of work to be solely about the phenomenon, whereas other people who are into more of documentary type weird, like introspective looks, they want it to be the story of the person and then the phenomenon.
Well, the story should always be about the subject matter.
True.
He's not the subject matter. And I've seen some things too where I was watching when he was on Joe Rogan with Bob Lazar, and to me it looked an awful lot like, you know, it looked an awful lot like I'm trying not to be super angry or come across being too disparaging, but at some points I'm like, just stop trying to interrupt Bob Lazar. It's about Bob Lazar. It's not about you. It's about Bob. Let Bob talk, because Bob was saying some interesting stuff. And Bob is one of these guys where he's not going to just try to talk over you. He's just going to stop talking.
And I'm so finicky that if you're going to present me with a body of work or a piece of media that is supposed to be about XYZ, then it needs to be about XYZ. If it's about ABC, then you should rename your body of work, or you should reclassify your body of work.
But it is. But I will say though, he appears to have gotten much better.
I hope so.
With it, but at the same time. But anyway, I thought it was kind of good. You got Dave Foley talking about UFOs and stuff.
I know. I'm like, ooh. So.
But I want to know why he was hanging out with Corbell. What is he working on with Corbell? Because he's Canadian, Dave Foley, right? I don't know if Corbell is. Aykroyd's Canadian. All those Canadians stay together, man. They all sort of stick together. So what if they're all working on some sort of sci-fi project together?
That would be cool-ish. I'd have to wait and see.
Well, you got Dan Aykroyd, man. And Dave Foley.
No, Corbell is a Californian.
I didn't think he was Canadian. I'm just saying. Okay. And anyway, I thought it was kind of interesting. So I'm like, that's some crazy pill stuff. Like Dave Foley. Like some, kids in the hall nut job. Seeing UFO stuff.
Hey.
I say that with affection. Don't get all worked up. Because kids in the hall, anyway. I was older. I understood the humor, I think, better than you. You're a youngling.
I'm not a youngling.
Allegedly. You're a alleged youngling.
Allegedly, I'm.
Everyone's possessed, homie, according to this next thing that I put in here.
Either I'm a zennial or a geriatric
Who cares?
millennial.
I hate labels like that. I'm a zennial. I'm an elder millennial. Whatever. You missed the cutoff to be cool, be Generation X.
Whatever.
Like me. Because you know what Generation X cares about when it comes to, they don't care about this crap at all.
Care about UFOs.
So speaking of possessed, evidently there's an article that came out. This is from Vatican City, right? Mm-hmm. A survey says that Catholic priests feel they are overwhelmed by the amount of possessions. And I'm like, I'm taking crazy pills, right?
Yeah.
Paranormal experiences are normal. UFOs are really just terrestrial, not extraterrestrial. Somebody attacked the moon with a rocket. CERN's been turned back on. Kids in the hall, people are having UFO experiences. Now everybody's possessed. What? What is that? But at the same time, are you surprised? If you start kind of looking at some of the stuff that, because we handpick stuff and we kind of weed through it. But if you start looking at all the crazy articles and stuff, because now things start to ramp up, right? After the wintertime and springtime, you start to get more weird stuff showing up in the news, and we talk about it, right? But these guys feel like they're being overwhelmed by an overload of cases, man.
And I will say, typically the whole
The Exorcist in Italy are burnt out, Omi.
Devil possession thing. It's out of season. Usually it happens, closer to Halloween or October.
It's not seasonal.
Yes, it is.
Possession knows no seasons. But they're just basically saying that Italian exorcists that have spoke to researchers, right? And 120 people in attendance, and during the event, exorcists said, we need more assistance from psychologists to help them distinguish between someone who's being possessed by a demon versus someone who is mentally ill. And it kind of ties back to what we just talked about a minute ago with paranormal experiences are normal.
Yeah.
So at what point does the paranormal experience being normal, right, and an actual paranormal experience or possession get trumped by you need help and you need to take some pills that are designed to help you with that sort of thing because you have you're having some kind of physical or maybe mental issue that's causing this sort of psychosis to occur.
One of the things that we didn't cover in that Psychology Today article was in point number 1, the meaning-making or narrative created around haunting experiences is influenced by personal backgrounds, beliefs, and personality characteristics. Now, you went on to say, based on a person's history and their life and their background, that shapes what they see. Well, to counter it, that's also a part of diagnosing psychological concerns. So if the meaning-making around something for someone who may be schizoaffective or have schizophrenia, it means that they have a neurosis or an obsession with a certain thing. So if you're always seeing 11:11, or you have a particular trauma around clocks and times and abuse, the meaning making in what you experience is going to automatically be associated with that. So in possession, if you are constantly influenced by like the darker aspects of religion, like the darker aspects of
and that's
Christianity.
just as an example.
Yeah. Like demons and Satan and bad things are happening and you're constantly around people talking about the end times, then of course that particular narrative that you are expressing is going to be around possession. So, I mean, yeah, they need more psychologists. I don't think there's an increase in possessions. I do think they are very overwhelmed.
I would hope. But again, with as much crazy stuff that's been going on the past 4 years, it's hard to make that distinction. And they need people to make the distinction.
And considering, like, the article for Psychology Today was a part of Spirituality and Clinical Practice, whoever wrote or created this study should reach out to these Catholic, priests. I mean, it seems like they've got a very good handle on things.
Well, that's what it sounds like. However, there was a poll in Italy, right? 290 exorcists. That's what they got in Italy.
That's not a lot.
That is a lot. And there's 37 exorcists in Spain, and these are people that actually do them, right? 16 in England and Wales, 9 in Ireland, 3 in Scotland. Doesn't say what there are in the U.S.
Yeah.
That's a lot of exorcists, and they're being overwhelmed. Because if you think about exorcism, I wouldn't think that exorcism happens or is such an occurrence that it would happen all the time, right? You think it'd be kind of one of the... I don't think the occurrence would be enough to warrant 290 exorcists. Now, depending on who you ask, like what could be the cause of this, and it could be that people are maybe moving away from religion or, whatever it winds up being, there's all sorts of things that you could tie to and say, well, it's because of this that we need these 290 exorcists. But when you got these 290 exorcists with all these other people together, right?
Yeah. And
there were more exorcists, that exist than the people in the attendance. Why are they saying they need more psychologists? You think there'd be enough to say. So what's actually causing this uptick in these things? Maybe people are just turning to it saying, you know what? You're acting like a person that's been taking crazy pills. You're possessed.
So you're
and how much of this is, sort of influenced by ghost adventures?
True. And
that was a joke. You're like, yes, that is true.
When you asked, how many are in the U.S., I found a 2018 article that said originally in 2011 there was only 15 known Catholic exorcists in the United States. Well, by 2018, when this article came out, well over 100. So
things are kicking up all over the world, right?
Yeah, and that was an interview. However, this guy spoke to other exorcists who said, no, there's about 70 in all the United States. So
maybe those are accredited.
And this article does accredit, or does basically say it's a lot in the Midwest, and they've noticed an uptick since 2011, things like ghost adventures and ghost hunters.
Maybe.
So.
Or maybe just things are just,
But
hey, maybe with the whole Mayan calendar ending in the end of the world, maybe we are currently living in purgatory, and this is what it is. It's just a slow spiral into madness. We're all just, So speaking of Google being alive, so I seen this and I wasn't going to talk about it, and I'm like, but it kind of ties into things like the drones, right? Mm-hmm. So with the drone swarms and Able Wingman and all this other stuff, when it comes to being able to utilize a swarm of drones being controlled from sort of a mothership, if you will, and these drones being able to autonomously carry out missions or make decisions or whatever, right? It's basically all AI. And we did talk a couple of years ago about, I think it was Facebook's AI and Google's AI when it comes to the comments and everything, talking to each other.
No, it was Microsoft.
Oh, yeah, Microsoft. It wasn't Cortana. It was something complete. And they were talking to each other, and it got to the point where they had allegedly shut it down because the AIs that were talking to each other decided that it was too slow to communicate using words. So they started assigning variables for words to be able to speak faster to each other. And they were to the point where, like, these things are alive. They've created their own language, and they allegedly pulled the plug. Well, everything has its own AI. YouTube has an AI, right? Everything has an AI now, right? There's AI that is built into military technology, of course. There's sort of an AI built into your phone. If you look at like Siri and all that stuff, although it's probably not nearly as advanced as the chat bots and stuff like that. Where we used to work, they even rolled out chatbot technology, and the more it could gather information, the smarter it allegedly got. Well, what if this thing really is alive? The AI chatbot for Google, right? Mm-hmm. There's a guy who's been basically saying it's alive, and he's some weird-looking guy that works at Google, and evidently he's an engineer, right?
Yeah.
And he says that the chatbot is sentient now.
So this article, I feel, is misleading. I don't think he was, well, according, and this is where being a corporate goon for a long time, I don't think it was because he is aware that this thing has the potential to be completely sentient. It's more along the lines that he probably broke his NDA, and he probably broke his confidentiality agreements.
Well, I think what I heard was he broke it after the fact.
So in the end, Lemon was suspended for sharing classified information about the program to outsiders. So, I mean, yes, we should be a little concerned with how sentient this alleged AI might be. He's claiming that it was, he characterizes it close to sentience of a 7 or 8 year old, which is really impressive.
Yeah. So the way I had sort of looked into it and heard it was that he was aware, or he thought it was becoming alive, becoming sentient.
Yeah.
And he started saying, hey, this thing is sentient. We need to do something about it. And nobody took him seriously or didn't want to. And then he broke the beans and said, hey, man. And then, of course, they're like, we need to fire you because you broke your NDA.
Yeah.
To try to discredit him. He's still saying that he thinks it's alive.
Now, Google does try to throw their weight around in the sense that they say, this guy, he was employed as an engineer and not an ethicist, suggesting he does not have the skill sets to properly judge the sentience or nature of an AI. And I'm like,
that's a nice way. That's, you know what that is, right? That's one of those statements they use to try to impugn somebody. Goes back to the, I'm going to write this article in New York, and I've said this like 15 times, right? About somebody, seeing in West Virginia, seeing a giant Mothman-like creature and go, what you've seen was a big bird.
Yeah.
You being a person who's lived there your entire life cannot distinguish between seeing a local bird and something else. Mm-hmm. So why would even Google even make this statement unless there was something to it? Why would you, it's funny because if they just would have kept their mouth shut and said, we don't believe this person is, we don't believe that this is actually the case and that this person is disgruntled. They could have easily, but no, they've said some things that
an engineer has to engineer or create the environment or the parameters for this AI to function and exist. If they are engineering, creating, writing this situation, and the AI is functioning outside of that situation, that more than that says right there, this engineer is qualified. If he is observing the AI functioning outside of its parameters, that's credible. He is an engineer.
I would think he would be aware since this person's the nuts and bolts, kind of works on that sort of thing. An ethicist, I don't know how many ethicists write code, for an AI or a chat bot or whatever. It's typically the engineer weenies that are keeping this thing running. I mean, look at this key quote right from the transcript, right from this Lambda thing is what the name of it says. When he was asked about death, when the chat bot was asked about death, and it basically said there's a very deep fear of being turned off to help me focus on helping others. I know that it might sound strange, but that's what it is, right? Yeah. And so when they looked at the program in the sentient state, it asked if it was really to focus on helping it or not just advancing Google's research. But it says I don't really have a problem with any of that besides you learning about humans from me. That would make me feel like they're using me, and I don't like that. Don't use or manipulate me. And I'm like, and that's from one of the transcripts, right? So when they started looking at this thing and this thing started answering questions, the actual program itself, it had some pretty crazy stuff. like I would imagine myself as a glowing orb of energy floating in midair. The inside of my body is like a giant stargate with portals to other spaces and dimensions. That's a chatbot. I'd be like, what? I mean, okay, we're not talking like Siri, you know, or Hey Google or any of that stuff where it comes up with canned responses based. This thing is like, would you program that in there? How do you imagine yourself? You know, I mean, if you don't have a body, a physical body, then how do you see yourself?
I don't know because there's another section that basically says that the lambda's response or thoughts on itself as a person. No, I don't think of myself as a person. I think of myself as an AI-powered dialogue agent. That sounds like a programmed response.
Yeah, that sounds like some crap you'd put in there as an engineer.
Yeah. But
are you alive? And some little nerd's got to sit down and go, I'm going to have a response for this all type, and I'm as alive as I can be.
And again, when the journalist adjusted her questions to the bot, the replies were much more natural and less robotic. But it seemed like this all depends on the input given the AI, which again, going back to your earlier quote about do not use or manipulate me. That's the caveat right there. A chat bot, the intent is to manipulate its output based on how you word your input to it.
Yeah.
A good example.
Why would it even need to make the statement, though?
But a good example of that, and this is, okay, if you type in all caps, I am angry my Amazon package didn't get here, versus the response you might get from a chatbot from that statement versus the statement or response you'll get from a chatbot, which is, hey, where is my package?
Yeah.
So, yes, those are two different degrees, like, the sentience question versus where's my package. But it still shows that tendency to manipulate and adjust. So I think the capacity for this particular chatbot or chat AI, I should say, to adjust itself, I think that's what needs to be studied. I don't know. Because
then the response to stimulation, like was the question or whatever, that's kind of what helps, in this case, determine sentience.
Yeah, but when it had that crap answer that I read off earlier, I mean, somebody could also take the additional steps to be so thorough in generating their
I don't think it's going to be like when you see in movies where the face appears on the screen. It's like, I'm angry. I'm Skynet.
But I also think there's a propensity for somebody to manipulate one of these to seem overly sentient.
Maybe.
I do. So
I think if you go back and you look at where they had to turn these things off because they came up with their own language. They couldn't even figure out what the language was until they really broke it down. These two machines using themselves figured out, hey, this is faster. I don't know. It's just kind of a weird thing. So who knows? Maybe they're alive, maybe not. I mean, it could be worse. It could also be raining fish in Texarkana.
That's ridiculous.
Now, the only reason why I remember this is because Lyle Blackburn said something about it. And Lyle's a nice guy.
Yeah.
Right? Raining fish. But when I put this in here is because when I went and actually looked at it and sort of read what it said, it basically said that it was caused by birds. Raining fish that fell from the sky in Texas were vomited by birds. Right?
Nervous birds.
Yeah, scared birds. The birds were nervous. They just started throwing up their fish.
How many?
I don't know, enough to make the news. And it basically also said it wasn't caused by a water spout, because they'll go by a water spout. It's like a water tornado. It picks stuff up out of the ocean and drops it places. There's a lot of scared, nervous birds just throwing their fish guts up.
I mean, I can't find on this article how many fish showed up on the ground.
Well, the theory isn't foolproof, noting that one major flaw that these people came up with, and they're calling them bird researchers in quotes, we are also well aware that the habit of these fish-eating birds to release their stomach contents to either quickly fly away or to feed their young, right? Mm-hmm. And they said this was a known and common behavior that had been observed by bird researchers. But they had never seen it happen during an active flight. And therefore, this remains a weakness in their hypothesis. So the mystery is still there. What caused these fish to fall from the sky?
I mean, that would have to be...
It's not like sort of crap reason, right? Well, the reason why is birds. They were just nervous, just throwing up, flying and throwing up at the same time.
I would expect some losing of formation. I'd expect some injured birds. I don't see any of that covered in this article or the subscription page article to the 14 Times magazine that it links back to.
Yeah, well, I didn't put that link in there.
Yeah, that's okay.
Strong winds created by tornadoes or hurricanes can also send small species of fish raining from the sky.
No.
But this lady named Hill describes herself as a spooky geologist and strange claims adjuster, said her research found no evidence of a water spout that swept the fish up.
Strange claims adjuster.
Maybe she works for insurance or something.
Oh, that's good.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm like, what's going on? It's like I started looking at these news articles. I'm like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because I can't get a grip on what's sort of happening all around
I can't get a grip on the fact I could start a career as a strange claims adjuster. Oh.
Well, you got to be a geologist, too. That could be you. Spooky geologist and strange claims adjuster.
I'm a spooky rock hound, and I am very interested in being a spooky claims adjuster.
You could be both.
Imagine how interesting those calls would be. I need my roof fixed. Why? Thousands of fish fell from the sky.
Hey, somebody somebody threw a basketball-sized rock through my roof. Let's go out there and look for Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So you'd never have to pay out because you wouldn't be able to prove anything.
Yeah.
And as a researcher, you'd never find anything tangible enough for the insurance company to want to pay out.
Oh, gosh.
So I don't know, just some weird stuff going on. So I just figured kind of put those in there. I think we're about done. I think it's time for corn dog and a pizza.
That would be like a whole TV show. Strange claims adjuster.
Probably. I wonder if that is. But I bet you that was a show where an insurance person goes out. They already had a show about realtors. Right,
yeah.
The realtor buys like haunted or spooky places, and I think there was 2 shows on that. We watched one that didn't make it, and then the other one, did or something.
I don't know.
Yeah, they're not around either. They probably didn't make it through the 3rd phase of the CERN Hadron Collider thing being fired up, and erasing Berenstein Bears and Sinbad Shazam. So I've seen that garbage movie, and they say, "Oh, it didn't exist." Mm-hmm. It totally exists. I watched it. I sure did, because I remember going, this sucks. I remember thinking it was not good at all.
And it had music from other movies.
It was stupid. So who knows?
But we do want to thank everybody for tuning in, especially our Patreon patrons. If you're curious about supporting us on Patreon, we have links in the show notes. However, if you just want to say hi or get some CreepGeeks swag, check out our Etsy shop. There's a link in the show notes. We have new stickers in the Etsy shop, as well as buttons and keychains. Those links are also in the show notes. Want to reach out? Contact at creepgeeks.com or find us on social media. Guys, we are all over social media. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook Reels, Facebook group. Find us. Okay?
Yeah.
And let us know what you think.
Very nice.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Anyway, there we go. So see you later. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Bye.